A series of extraordinary allegations have been made against Binance, the world's largest crypto exchange, over the last few weeks, starting with an article from Fortune magazine and then the Wall Street Journal and New York Times both published similar articles on the same day earlier this week. We're here to address these allegations with top executives from the company, Richard Teng, Noah Perlman, and Astra Cai. And Richard Teng is the co-CEO of Binance, and Noah Perlman is the chief compliance officer, and Astra is the global head of sanctions. Just a brief bio on all three panelists before we get started. Richard has over 3 decades of financial services and regulatory experience. Prior to joining Binance, he was the CEO of the Financial Services Regulatory Authority at Abu Dhabi Global Market and chief regulatory officer of the Singapore Exchange, and the Director of Corporate Finance in the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Noah has worked in Gemini prior to Binance, first as CCO and then as Chief Operating Officer before starting in crypto. He was a Managing Director and the Global Head of Financial Crimes at Morgan Stanley. And prior to that, he was also involved with the DEA as an assistant United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. Astra is Binance's global head of sanctions since late 2024. Astra has been dedicated to leading the day-to-day management of Binance's global sanctions compliance program. She has more than a decade of experience working in law firms and in-house helping companies manage sanctions and financial crime risk. Welcome to the show, Richard, Astra, and Noah. I've had the pleasure of speaking with not too long ago. You can check out Noah's last interview with me down below, link down below. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you. Let's get started with the allegations themselves. Richard, so maybe help us by clarifying what has been the timeline of events over the last couple of weeks. So as reported by the WSJ and the New York Times earlier this week, there's been $1.7 billion in flows to wallets on Binance linked to Iran-associated and sanctioned entities. We'll talk about that in more detail in just a bit. And following these investigations, there's been the suspension and firing of at least 4 employees in Binance tied to the investigations. So from these reports in these articles, it looks like there was an investigation and then Binance dismissed several employees at Binance involved with these investigations. And then you posted on X a letter from Binance's legal counsel, basically asking the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times to correct certain inaccuracies in the report. So walk us through what these inaccuracies are and how these allegations came about in the first place.
Sure. So first of all, David, thanks for having us, right? So, but before I answer all those detailed questions, I wanted to set the stage of how and what we have built as a compliance program. I spent, as you mentioned, decades as financial services regulator, so I know what good looks like in compliance. And this is something that we take very, very seriously because, as you know, Binance pay a heavy price for our compliance shortfall. And we have since taken great pains and a lot of resources to get our compliance into where it is today under Noah's leadership on that front. So this false, misleading reporting, they are very unfortunate. They do a great injustice to the compliance program we built. They do a great injustice to the hard work put in by our 1,500 compliance staff working tirelessly around the clock to make sure that the platform is safe, our users are safe. We are here and work very closely with law enforcement agencies on that front. And they count for 25% of our workforce, right? So these are things that we take it very seriously. But I wanted to stress a few points at the outset, and some of those relates to what you mentioned. With reference to the cases that you mentioned, we have employees departed because they breached data handling policies. And these are some of the things that we at Binance have zero tolerance for because, for example, things like insider trading, breaches of data protection, they impact user protection and they introduce vulnerabilities on the platform. So we have to take all these things very seriously. Investigators were not and will never be let go from Binance because of escalating compliance concern. To the contrary, we need investigators to do a good job at investigating and escalate them quickly so that we can safeguard the platform and other users. It's something that we demand. And the truth is, and we share those with the journalists, and they failed to report. They came up with very biased, one-sided reporting. The truth was, the investigation continued after the departure of the said investigators who are disgruntled. And we completed those investigations. We off-boarded the relevant entities. We cooperated with the relevant law enforcement agencies and complied with our disclosure obligations, as we always do, and we will continue to do so, right? So there are various claims that are false on that front. They fail to really give the context of what happened. So we have completed the investigation. As I mentioned, we continue to work very closely with law enforcement agencies on that front. On claims relating to the alleged transfer on the Iranian-linked entities and large dollar figures that's being cited, let me again put across that the facts are as follow. None of the Binance users were sanctioned. None of the wallets where the funds were received were known to be associated with any sanctioned entities at the time of the transaction. And our review did not find any Binance users directly transacting with the sanctions person or wallet. So there are a lot of safeguards within the platform. We do not allow users or transactions from sanctioned jurisdiction. Astra can elaborate on those, and we have strong controls to prevent such transaction. Right? We conduct KYC of our users and continue to review them to make sure that we do not allow sanctioned individuals or corporates to conduct activities on our platform. And we conduct transaction screening for any transfer in, transfer out from the platform against third-party industry solutions that's used by financial institutions worldwide. And we do not allow any transfer attributable to sanctions person. Right? So all these are facts, and we have provided them. But the very irresponsible media coverage suggested very reckless indifference on our part, disregarding our compliance or sanction obligations. And these are wholly false, right? So let me stress again, we do not let go of people, investigators, whether it's in the past or going forward, because of they doing their job. It will never happen, right? So let me stress a lot of this. We have built a very strong, robust compliance program that serves to protect our users, our platform. And we work very proactively with law enforcement agencies to continue to detect and fight illicit crimes. Maybe just set that as a stage at the outset.
Yes, and former CEO CZ also took to Twitter, or X, to comment on this when it came out. This is actually a snippet from Fortune magazine that reported the same thing a couple weeks ago. I don't know any details or who, but just reading the article, it's self-contradictory. You can put a negative narrative on anything by talking to an anonymous source who isn't happy or paid to FUD. I don't run Binance anymore, but as ex-CEO, I know they run every transaction through multiple third-party anti-money laundering tools. So a lot of this has to do with what you just spoke about. These individuals were dismissed for, I guess, individual reasons. But I want to just comment on the articles themselves and how these extraordinary claims came to be. So a group of internal investigators at the giant cryptocurrency exchange Binance, this is from the New York Times, made a series of startling discoveries last year. People in Iran had gained access to more than 1,500 accounts on the Binance platform over the previous year. About $1.7 billion had flowed from 2 Binance accounts to Iranian entities with links to terrorist groups, a possible violation of global sanctions. This is according to investigators internally who reported them to top executives, and the New York Times reviewed these company records. First of all, can you just address whether or not these numbers are true? 1,500 accounts on the Binance platform and $1.7 billion flowed from 2 Binance accounts to Iranian entities linked to terrorism.
Yeah, thanks. And David, nice to be on again.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, so look, I'm going to answer those questions, but let me also sort of set the stage a bit. This is very personal to me, and we've spent the last 3 years since I've been here really dedicated full energy to building a great program and improving everything. And when we have false accusations like this, it really strikes not just at me, but at all the men and women here that are working to really improve compliance. Turning to the allegations, the specific allegations, one of the challenges and one of the real frustrations by the reporting is that it appears that the former employees may have shared internal working documents that reflected preliminary observations, which were part of an ongoing process, not our final findings or conclusions. That's part of the way a process works. I mean, as you mentioned at the outset, I'm a former federal prosecutor. former counsel to law enforcement agency. This is sort of standard operating procedure. Investigators, they get suspicion, they do an investigation, it's robust, but then that needs to be challenged and vetted. So for example, the New York Times mentions 1,500 accounts. Well, the investigation showed that those 1,500 accounts, there was no conclusion that those were Iranian accounts. They were frequently using VPNs, virtual private networks. VPN usage alone does not establish sanctions exposure. We have strict KYC and compliance procedures in place. We prohibit usage from sanctioned countries. VPN is something that we look at, but in and of itself, the fact that these users were using VPN does not mean that they were Iranian accounts. As Richard said at the outset, these preliminary investigations were brought to us by investigators, and then our process kicked in. We did a very thorough investigation. That investigation was ongoing. At the time the employees left, that had not been finished. It had not been completed. So a lot of the allegations that they raised in documents that I assume were seen by the press had not been finally vetted, and we hadn't made official conclusions. And the idea that we would dismiss employees for raising something, it's actually preposterous on its face, as evidenced by the fact that the investigation continued, the relevant accounts were offboarded, and relevant reporting was made.
Fair enough. So you're denying the claim that there were 1,500 accounts linked to Iran terrorist groups and $1.7 billion flowing to these terrorist groups. That's false.
David, thanks for giving me the opportunity to answer that question directly. So this is what I can say about that. Binance didn't knowingly provide accounts to users in Iran, and certainly we didn't knowingly facilitate transactions involving sanctioned entities in Iran or otherwise. As we said, once Binance was notified by external sources of a potential concern, we undertook a thorough investigation. It led to the offboarding of relevant users. To me, this shows that the compliance program was working. That being said, there is some nuance here. Binance had no reason to know at the time of the transactions whether funds went from Binance indirectly to certain wallets. And certainly we wouldn't have allowed that to happen if information were available at the time of those transactions.
Astra, I do want to ask you some questions on sanctions in just a minute, but just going back to Richard for a minute, just maybe explain to the public watching this why there are internal investigators in the first place at Binance. What is their role? And why are these investigations taking place? Maybe let's just back up here.
Yeah. So, David, before I address that, I just want to express my deep appreciation to Noah and the compliance team for all the hard work and the heavy lifting. He has really transformed and uplifted our compliance program. Noah and myself work very, very closely on that front, and he knows that he has my full support in terms of resourcing, headcount, processes, procedures to get us in the top-notch shape on that front. So I really appreciate for what he has done. But let me address, right? So as Noah mentioned, right, in the course of our work, we do receive a lot of intelligence. We do share intelligence with law enforcement agencies. In fact, we've gotten a lot of commendation letters because we go beyond our duty of call, which many other exchanges don't do, right? So just for instance, on the sanctions front, right? I think many people may not appreciate this, but we have devoted so much time, energy on this. And if you look at data sets, right, on that front, in terms of sanction-related exposure on our exchange, right, it has reduced dramatically by 97% from 2024 to 2025. And we compare much better compared to the 10 other global exchanges on that front. We work with law enforcement agencies to confiscate 131 million in illicit funds in 2025 alone, right? So all those are very facts, but people who are in blockchain know that we cannot bring that figure down to zero because we can't stop people from transferring in. And that's the nature of blockchain, right? But once they are transferred in, and we do, as Tuan mentioned, we do KYC, we do transaction monitoring, and if there's anything that's suspicious, we then work with law enforcement agencies. We have the ability to freeze and confiscate those funds, right, which we have done, and working very closely with law enforcement agencies on that front. So we do have an investigation team. And so let me just walk through with you a typical case, right? So any financial institution and qualified compliance person can tell you that, whether it's a bank, whether it's financial institutions, we work daily to try to identify possible suspicious transaction, whether it's through different type of intel, through screening records, through KYC, scanning, etc. And we will start investigating those, right? And at the outset, you're just gathering all the information. Normally, the investigators have some hypothesis that may be wrong, may be disproved later on, right? And then work through that. There could be proper cost, there's no cost, right? When there's no cost, right, you keep the users, you may ask for additional information. But where there are proper costs, then you offboard the users. You then work with law enforcement agencies to see whether they can bring relevant actions because they have the statutory powers to do so. And then they can pursue actions against the possible persons for any suspicion on that front. So that's the role of the investigation team internally. But the compliance functions span across, 1,500 people span across. So the investigation team is just one function within the compliance function. But the entire team work tirelessly as an outfit, as a team, to make sure that we keep our platform safe on that front.
Astra, so back to the sanctions. Can you just explain how Binance cooperates with authorities on monitoring activity in sanctioned regions, including Iran and Russia, for example? So, I'm assuming, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but users in those countries are allowed to use Binance in some way, or are they not? Just generally speaking, if I were an Iranian citizen, I want to use Binance, what is a procedure for that?
Yeah. So let me just get to your first question about if this is Iranian users. So Binance prohibits providing services to residents in Iran. That means regardless of nationality, right? It could be Iranian national. It could be a non-Iranian national, as long as they are resident in Iran. Binance prohibits providing services to residents in Iran, period. The second one, you're talking about the Iranian nationals. So if Iranian nationals reside outside of Iran, move to a different country, say reside in Europe, Binance is not prohibited from providing services to all these users. This is also specified in our terms of use. Our terms of use prohibit providing services to certain jurisdictions, which is currently include Cuba, Iran, North Korea, the regions of Crimea, the so-called Luhansk People's Republic, and the so-called Donetsk People's Republic. Those are the regions Binance prohibits providing services to. So it's not attached to nationality.
Okay. Noah, can you just comment broadly on the compliance measures that Binance takes internally to monitor and flag illicit activity overall? What are some of the red flags that automatically trigger your system?
Yeah. So just echoing what Richard and Astra said, and I'll preface it by saying the program is one of constant improvement. Any chief compliance officer who tells you, their program is perfect or doesn't have room for enhancement is not being truthful. We always can improve, and there's always issues. Of course, we've got, as Richard said it at the outset, robust KYC and KYB. So when those people have to verify where they are, if you indicate that you're Iran as country of residence, you're automatically blocked. Of course, we've got sanctions name screening, an ongoing screening. So the whole host of controls that we have, that we test, that we validate, and then we look to improve them. So that's sort of one example. And also just to echo, I think something that both Richard and Astra said about U.S. users. We don't have U.S. users on the platform, and we've got an extremely robust procedure and process around ensuring that and testing that, both for individuals and for companies that may have a U.S. nexus. It's a cross enterprise effort to ensure that we are upholding that, and that's one of the things we take very seriously.
Okay, and Binance.
David, I just wanted to add a point because I'm not quite sure how sophisticated and informed your viewers are, because those are very technical answers, right? So in a nutshell, whatever we have adopted is in line with what international financial institutions adopt on residents or sanctioned countries, right? These are in line with global standards, in line with what other financial institution does. And we do that very robustly. So I do hope that the nuances and the details are not lost on that front.
Okay. Well, let's say someone were a user of Binance outside of those sanctioned regions. I think they may be wondering, well, what happens to my personal information after I KYC? How do you vet whether or not my information is being sent to the authorities versus somebody who is a little more suspicious, for example, right? What is your process for cooperating with the authorities and submitting client information to the authorities? Who do you decide, or how do you decide whose information to submit or not? No one, you want to take a stab at this?
Sure. Let me start. So first of all, as there was some reporting, I can't remember which of the articles, maybe all of them, that we have changed our approach to cooperating with law enforcement. It's absolutely not the case. We're as committed as ever to cooperating appropriately with law enforcement around the world. Richard mentioned some of the stats before, so I won't repeat those, but we respond. One of the things I should say is that with our licenses around the world, responding means you have to respond appropriately and follow the appropriate protocols. For example, there's something called a mutual legal assistance treaty, which may govern how you provide information. So users can be assured that we follow the appropriate protocols and we're not just handing out data inappropriately. We respect and follow the appropriate legal reporting obligations, along with the relevant data privacy and protection laws that govern information, how it's shared with authorities. And that varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. We have a fantastic data privacy team that provides us advice and guidance on that. But both Binance, our subsidiaries, we have a policy and a culture of cooperation and compliance with all lawful information requests and legal inquiries, same as any traditional financial institution. And that philosophy and culture has not changed.
Okay. Going back to Astra for a minute. Astra, I just want to point your attention to the New York Times article once more. So it alleges that there's workarounds that Iranian entities have made. So they've, according to this report, used offshore accounts or perhaps Hong Kong-based entities to bypass certain Binance measures. So the most significant link the investigators discovered here, according to this report, between Binance accounts and Iranian entities involved a Hong Kong business called Blessed Trust. Blessed Trust is owned by 5 companies incorporated in the British Virgin Islands and the Cayman Islands, according to Hong Kong records. It also has a business relationship with Binance. Hexa Whale is another one that was identified, based in Hong Kong, had used Binance to spend $400 million in crypto wallets tied to Iranian entities, according to the documents. Can you just comment on Hexa Whale and Blessed Trust and the relationship that these entities have had with Binance?
Sure. Before I just answer this question, I just want to, I think it's worth setting the stage, just highlighting, the nature of the blockchain, just as, Richard also mentioned, blockchain transactions normally are multi-hop transactions. What does multi-hop means? That means that there will be multiple steps if you see for all these transaction pattern. So that meaning a fund moving through several wallet before reaching some a final destination. For example, money from the wallet A1 could be seen through wallet flowing through the wallet A2. Maybe with some money will stay in wallet A2 and then remaining going to wallet A3. And then through the similar way and through multiple steps, finally go to the recipient wallet, what we can just quote it, maybe A12 and A15. Right? And then in between, there will be multiple intermediate wallet, A2 to A5, if you treat them as one cohort, and A6 to A11, you can treat it as another a cohort. And then the thing I want to flag out is all these intermediate wallet are not a sanctioned wallet at the time of the transactions. Right, and then when you're looking at that, the final receiving wallet, A12 and A15, they have been identified by the law enforcement as the sanctioned wallet after all these multi-step transaction occurred. So the thing is like the exchange, say Binance, providing services to wallet A1, and then another wallet would not be able to know the funds is coming from wallet A1, have flowing through so many steps to the end wallet A12 to A15 at the time of the transaction. Because at that moment, even we use the industry recognized on-chain tools, all these tools would not be able to flag any of these transactions for review. Just to go back to the point, is the end wallet hasn't been designated or identified as sanctioned at the time of the transaction, and actually in the case it happened after all these multi-step transaction occurred. So the same logic we can just apply to the cases we are talking about here.
Richard, do you have anything to add? Yes.
Yeah. So just let me explain in very simple terms, right? So I will give you an example. For example, I think what Astra is saying is this, right? So a person was investigated. Just take a bank. So a bank identifies suspicious transaction, right? Whether it's through intelligence, whether it's through the bank screening, continuous screening, etc., and then it start investigating. It then offboard the users, and then work with law enforcement agencies to bring relevant actions against the person. And then thereafter, the person is sanctioned, right? The bank cannot be faulted for having all this prior transaction before reasonable suspicions arise or proper information was received to enable proper screening to take place, right? Or proper intelligence to take place and proper investigation could take place. In fact, the compliance program is working, right? Because of that reason, because the investigation take place, you can assess the risk, you offboard the person, you report them to the law enforcement agencies, they take actions, and then the person was sanctioned, right? All these are part and parcel of what financial institution does on a day-to-day basis, right? So I think Astra, went through a very technical things to say, there are multi-loops, multiple layers away. Those transfer are not from Binance directly to any sanctioned persons, but through multiple layers of wallet, from wallet A to wallet B to wallet C, wallet D, etc. And then subsequently, some of the other wallets were sanctioned. Right? So I think those are just examples. But in a very simple nutshell, we just have to highlight that this is what financial institutions go through on a day-to-day basis to make sure that we work very closely with law enforcement agencies to detect and fight illicit crimes.
And just dovetailing off of that, Noah, just from a regulator's perspective and law enforcement's perspective, how would the Department of Justice, or let's say the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network in the U.S., actually determine if there was prior intent to send money through a wallet to, let's say, an intermediary to then somehow finance terrorism? And I mean, if I accidentally, let's say, sent a couple $100 to a wallet that I had no idea was linked to an Iranian terrorist organization, and later my account got frozen, and that was just pure coincidence or an accident, or I was just given the wrong wallet address information. I mean, is my account all of a sudden flagged? I mean, how the authorities have to prove somehow that I'm linked to these terrorist organizations, right? What is a step there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, David, and I'm not sure exactly how how law enforcement or regulators will take a look in any individual case. But generally, you're right. I mean, they're going to look at sort of knowing and intention. And in this case, look, it's probably not surprising that since the news broke, the teams internally here have been tirelessly going over and revetting every step that we did. And I am 100% confident that not only did we take the right steps once we were notified, but even before that, that there is zero intention here to violate any rules or regulations. We didn't find any evidence that Binance users directly transactioned, had direct transactions with sanctioned persons or wallets. But importantly, there was no intent. There's been no uncovery of any intent of anybody here to subvert the process, to subvert the investigative process. So I think if regulators, prosecutors, anyone who wants to take a look and ask information, we will be open, consistent with our legal obligations. And I think that the story to be told here is that Binance did the right thing once it was on notice, and that there was no intent to do the wrong thing, no intent to cover anything up. And it's why at the outset I started why I find this, so personally, why this really hits me and the entire department personally, because we were so committed to doing the right thing, and we have been for many years. And so to have this one-sided coverage that doesn't reflect that, it's inaccurate, and it's personally upsetting.
Well, can you just comment on this paragraph here from this article? Over roughly 2 of the past years, the investigators discovered $1.2 billion in crypto had flowed from Blessed to Trust Binance account to Iranian-linked entities. According to the documents, the investigators found ties between those entities and crypto wallets controlled by Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, which has been designated a terrorist organization. Found ties is pretty ambiguous. What does that mean?
No, exactly, and it goes to what we talked about at the top of the hour, which is that this reporting is based on preliminary reports, which have a lot of assumptions that were not concluded, a lot of suspicions that were not finally vetted. In short, the report wasn't done, and so this information and is based on preliminary reporting. 2 other things to add: both Astra and Richard talked about this idea of hops and links. And if you go out enough hops, you can probably link anything to, you can make links that really are not supported by direct evidence. So that's sorry, go ahead, David.
No, I mean, I think somebody reading this might ask you, well, everything conducted on chain is not difficult to track. I mean, unless they're using privacy tokens, but even then there's methods that law enforcement, could use. So what would be the process if investigators or law enforcement will approach you, Noah, and say, hey, can you look into these $1.2 billion in crypto funds that we suspect may be linked to the Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran? Like, what would be the procedure there, given that everything's already on chain?
Yeah, if that were to happen and we're on notice from lumpers, of course we look at it and then we take appropriate action. I mean, I think we talked about how we've been, once we were notified of problematic behavior, we took appropriate steps, offboarded appropriate users, made appropriate reporting.
But is that Binance's responsibility to link one wallet to another, or is that really the jurisdiction of the DOJ to take your information and parse that through? I mean, who should be doing what here?
Yeah. So look, we can only know what we can know. I mean, we can't take proactive activity if wallets haven't been sanctioned yet. And as Richard said, if they're sanctioned after the fact, then we can react to that. But we can't be held responsible for blocking funds to wallets that at the time were not sanctioned.
Okay. Astra, do you have anything to add?
The thing I want to just add is once we get the intelligence from the law enforcement, we act upon that immediately and then take the conduct an investigation and process the investigation in accordance with company policies and procedure, and then took the appropriate action, including boarding certain accounts. So that's the highlight will be we act upon information, we took the action.
As a user of Binance, somebody might be wondering if following these allegations or events, there might be changes to KYC. Just practically speaking, can you comment on that?
Look, we will take a look. As I mentioned, we're in constant evolution of the program, constant enhancements, and so certainly we'll take a look. I mean, we've already taken a look, and you always do a postmortem when you have events, whether they're accurate or not. What are the allegations here? Is there anything we can improve? And we will improve it. But in terms of users, I don't anticipate any direct sort of user impact on the retail level in terms of the KYC processes. They're very robust right now. But as I said, we're always looking to enhance and see, do we have gaps? Can we improve our processes and procedures? And we'll take a look there.
This was a user on X that responded to CZ's post that I showed earlier. So were the fired investigators using the same third-party AML anti-money laundering tools that Binance relies on, or did they have access to something internal that flagged Iran-related activity? Noah, do you want to try to answer this question?
Yeah. So the answer, I don't know what is specifically the investigators were using here, but they had the same tools. We use a variety of tools, both internal and industry-wide respected vendors. We don't rely on just one vendor, so we have lots of tools at our disposal. So that's how I would answer that one.
Okay. Richard, just from a broader strategy standpoint, after these allegations were made, is Binance planning to change its strategy of international reach? Are you tightening the border, so to speak, on which countries to do business in, or are you not changing anything at all?
No, David. So I think, unknown to many of your viewers, we went through a very comprehensive, we are the most regulated platform globally, right? So you think about it. We are regulated in more than 21 local jurisdictions. I'm currently in Japan. I just spoke at the GFTN event. We are regulated here. But unlike other platforms and unlike other global platforms, we are the only global platform that has a home regulator that's being regulated end to end, right? So the FSRA from ADGM went through a very comprehensive exercise with us, right, over the course of more than a year, doing deep dive, understanding the operations, looking at our policies, procedures, etc. And everything on the platform, going from initial onboarding of new customers, right? Things like know your customers, know your business, KYC, KYB, to transaction monitoring, to market surveillance, to wallet storage, to risk management, to governance structure, etc. So they look at everything, listings, and they're comfortable. And we are the only global platform that's licensed in such a manner with our global liquidity regulated as well, right? So I want to stress that, and that took a lot of effort to bring about. And as Noah mentioned, he's very proud of that achievement. So are we at the Binance team. And that's something that we will continue to do. Our ambition is to serve 1 billion users. There's no change in that. We will continue with our global footprint. We already work very closely with many global regulators, and we intend to work with many, many more. We want to roll out more products for our users. As Noah mentioned, compliance is a journey, is an evolving journey. The standards are always changing and being raised all the time. We will keep up with that. We have to make all the necessary investment on that front. But at the end of the day, we are very confident of the platform. We will continue to make investments in the areas that we need to make. We will continue to make enhancement in areas that we need to make. But this is, in my view, the best-in-class infrastructure. And we will need to continue to push ahead in terms of supporting our users globally.
So, Richard, can you just comment on the change in personnel? I mean, maybe the investigators that were dismissed were done so for reasons outside of this case, but has the company looked into replacing them or changing the structure of the internal investigation team following these allegations, or perhaps have there been changes in the last couple of months that the public should be aware of?
No, so as an organization, we're always evolving. It's not only the compliance department, right? So with the advent of AI, and we are a tech company, and we are very heavy users and investors into the blockchain technology as well. The mandate, I mean, you see JP Morgan and you see all the different big institutions all coming out to say that the workforce is being restructured dramatically, right, on that front. Because, just take very simple function, compliance function. With the usage of AI, you can do a lot of things like fraud detection using AI, sieving through documents to make sure whether there's any fraudulent documents. You can do transaction monitoring, market surveillance very effectively using AI. So the nature of the workforce is being restructured in a big way, whether it's on compliance or in many of our other departments. So we need to look at that, to look at where we need to add talent and where can we rely on technology. Right. So the restructuring is continuing throughout the organization, not only in ours, but throughout the world and in many financial institutions. And we will continue to make sure that with all this restructuring, we become even better in terms of efficiency, effectiveness. But what is not being compromised, and we will never compromise, is our upholding global standards. We working with global regulators on that front, upholding the rule of law, including on not only AML, but sanctions and counter-terrorism financing, etc. And those are extremely important, and we continue to invest very heavily.
I think let's close off on what Binance is just working on right now in light of these allegations, and what's next for strategy, compliance, and the sanctions team? Starting with you, Richard. So I saw that you tweeted on your own social media a letter from your counsel, your legal counsel. I'll just share this on the screen. Following the reports of the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, I mean, what are you hoping to achieve at this point in time? What's ideal for you here?
No, so you see, there are various falsehood, there are various insinuation, they are totally misleading and wrong. We need to make that right. We need to put out a very robust response. Otherwise, you do great injustice to our compliance team and to the hard work that we have put in place, right? They insinuated various things to say that we fire our investigators for raising concerns. And that is false, right? Purely false on that front. Again, after the investigator left, we continued the investigation. We completed the investigation. We offboarded the users. We notified the law enforcement agencies on that front, right? So there are many things that we need proper correction on. Otherwise, viewers and people around the world will have wrong perception on that front. And all these reports aim to mislead. There's a lot of grievances that is because of all this falsehood being brought around. So we need to fight that, and we need to raise the cost for all this wrong reporting that's being promulgated. But on the compliance front, it's not only on the compliance, on the different controls within Binance. We continue to invest greatly. As I mentioned, we spend millions of dollars a year just on the compliance function alone. We continue to add expertise to the team, enhance the quality, enhance the program. Noah can discuss a lot more on that. But as I mentioned, the governance structure of Binance is such that we make sure that the compliance functions has unfettered access to the board of directors, get proper resourcing to do what they want. And the fact is, we don't interfere in many of these compliance decisions, right? There's no business interference, there's no executive interference on what they need to do to discharge their responsibility and to uphold the rule of law.
No, I think we've already discussed some of the compliance changes that you may or may not be making. It's always evolving, like you said. But what changes would you like to see throughout this year that may or may not either help the internal investigators, do their job, or perhaps make it easier for the DOJ and other, entities, law enforcement agencies around the world to cooperate with Binance?
Yeah. So let me answer that, and then also I just want to go back to the allegation about the ships, because I just think it's an important clarification. Sure. But let me first answer your question, David. So look, to me, the most exciting part of compliance, and I've been in this space, over 20 years, is artificial intelligence. Richard talked about AI, and it's not just because, you can reduce headcount or you can be faster. It's because you can be more effective. And one of the incredible things about working at Binance is the tech resources and the super brain power we have working on these issues. We have over 100 engineers that are just devoted to compliance functions. And so one of the things that we're really looking to do in the next year to improve our processes is how can we use AI not just to be quicker, but to be more accurate, so we can really identify the risk, help law enforcement and regulators around the world. It's something that the board of directors is supportive of, that Richard and the co-CEO Yi are supportive of, and we have full support to do that, and it's something that I'm super excited about. Just going back to the Russian allegation, because I think the board Astra talked about it generally, but I want to actually specifically deny that allegation. We received information about that Russian ship issue. We conducted a thorough review across all the accounts. The vessels referenced were not sanctioned, and the transaction activity itself did not constitute a sanctions violation. So we complied with all legal and reporting obligations, and that's one of the things that's so frustrating about the article, the suggestion that we...
Was what you just said in the internal report that supposedly the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal used to reference when writing that article? Or is that just completely fabricated here?
I don't know what was in the, I haven't seen what the Journal Times relied on, but I do know that we provided the media with our review and response, and these things were just not included. So, I mean, it's just an example that that insinuation or actually allegation that we permitted sanctual activity in that it's incorrect.
Astra, the sanctions committee must be busy making changes as well. Can you comment on what's ahead for your department here?
As Richard and Noah mentioned earlier, Binance sanction program is working effectively. It's a very effective program. We have strong controls. So that this also has been evidenced by what has been discussed about all the allegations. So we act upon the intelligence received from law enforcement immediately, and then took the proper actions, including offboarding the user immediately. So that's basically a testament to our effective control program. Does it mean that there's nothing to be enhanced from there? No. I think for all these compliance officers, we know all the compliance program could be enhanced. So for going forward, we're continuously enhance our controls to make our program more effective.
All right, Richard, I'll give you the last word before we close off here. So, let's just take your personal sentiment on what's been going on over the last couple of weeks with these allegations. What was your first reaction when you saw the reporting in media? And, as the leader of co-CEO of Binance, how are you trying to make Binance, A, more robust on a compliance basis, but B, also competitive in the global crypto exchange world? Presumably, Binance is not the only exchange, facing similar scrutiny here, but you're trying to stay competitive. So let's start from your initial response to what you're doing next, strategy-wise.
No, we have been doing the same things in the past 2 to 3 years. We have been spending a lot of time, effort. It's not something that we are building overnight, right? The team has continued to expand to about 1,500 compliance staff now, spending millions of dollars a year. And we keep building that out, right, to make sure it's robust. And I mean, my background, as you know, is a financial services regulator. I believe with our global reach and size and being the most regulated exchange in the world, will allow us that competitive edge that nobody else has, right? Because going forward, if you look at the landscape, we have more and more institutions coming through. They demand high standards of compliance, right? And we are working with many global institutions on that front, right? So we make all these investments. We want to make sure, and we have the ability to do so. We have the financial strength to do so, right? And many of the other smaller exchanges can't do it, right? We can, as Noah mentioned, we have the tech resources, we have the compliance resources, we have the risk management resources to make sure that we make sure all these are important modes for us, right? And competitive advantage for us. And we intend to make use of them to the fullest advantage. And to do so, we need to continue investing in all these important functions, right? As we continue to bring the next billion users in, including many institutions, sovereign wealth funds, corporates, family offices, and accredited investors. So that is going to be our ambition and our goal, and we continue to invest very heavily.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Richard, Noah, and Astra. I appreciate your time in clarifying some things here for us, and we'll stay tuned for more updates. But thank you for your time for now. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to follow Binance, link down below, for more information as updates come in.